More about Star.
Star went on a walk around the world with a group. I think they're called Walk for Peace, something really simple like that.
Her profile pictures.
Star has phenomenal photo out of her journeys walking around the world. She walked all across America. She walked all across Europe. She walked all across Russia and China, and then she took a plane or a boat or something and came back to America. She did this not by herself. She did this with like hundreds of people, and you know they had support vehicles and the whole thing, and it took years. And she was gone most of the time that I was in high school, and then right when I got out of high school and I left to go on a bike trip with a bunch of friends all around Northern California, Star came home from her trip, and she was there. And then when we left the ridge on our bikes and went around Northern California, and we went to this really awesome community in 1992. We went to this really awesome community, and they taught us. Well, they live really remotely. They live out the south part of the Trinity River up in Trinity County, and they have a dirt road that's 25 miles to the nearest pavement, which is in the middle of nowhere, and you have to walk miles down this trail to get to a little bridge, like Indiana Jones style bridge, that you cross over the little wooden bridge, and then you get to their little community with no car access. And they have all these little houses, and they've carried every board, every bathtub, everything out there. And they have massive gardens, and they all live out there, and they hunt deer, and they tan buckskin, and they grow these amazing gardens, and they make crafts, and then they go out in the summer and they sell their crafts at festivals and stuff. Anyways, we went there on our bike trip, and those are the people who taught me how to tan hides. Because my mother we'd always picked up roadkill since I was a little kid off the road. So I learned how to skin deer when I was 6, and I skinned, hundreds of animals. And but they actually taught me how to tan hides with the brains when I was 17. And then they taught me how to make fire with sticks and how to make traps. And my parents were gardeners, so we grew a lot of food already. But they just showed us how to grow bigger vegetables organically without any fertilizers at all, only using what's it called? Cover crop. So we'd grow the legume, peas and other things that have a lot of nitrogen in them, legumes that have a lot of nitrogen. And then what they do is they dig a trench and they pull that dirt out, and then they double dig it down a second foot deeper, and then they take the foot in front of you and they bring that dirt, roll all the peas and the vetch and whatever over, tuck it in, and then they just keep doing this double tilling thing. And so they have 2 feet of depth of soil that's all stirred up, and they just fertilize. It's like vegan farming, and they grow massive organic vegetables like that with no fertilizers at all. And so when I lived there, we learned how to do all these really beautiful skills, and we got to kind of be white people who lived with a lot of the good skills that the native people had, but the native people either haven't been willing to teach the white people, or they weren't at the time, or white people weren't interested in knowing, whatever it was. And we got to learn it without all the traditions and the dogma of it, and just got to enjoy the spirit and have our own connection with nature and learn those skills. And so then we came home, and during this whole time I had taken a vow never to ride in a car, so I didn't ride in a car for 4 whole years. And I walked
How old
everywhere.
were you?
I was 15 when I decided I was never going to ride in a car again.
Why is that?
Well, this is backtracking a bit, because this is 1990 when I decided not to ride cars. Because the first Gulf War was happening, and during the first Gulf War, it came to our attention that it really wasn't about Saddam Hussein. It wasn't about any of those things, and we all know that the government had propped up Saddam Hussein as a puppet dictator and all those kinds of things, and it was all about oil. And I just it just dawned on me when we used to walk through the tunnels underneath Nevada City, and when we were teenagers, little runaway kids, we all just lived, you know, in various little closets and very out in the woods and all kinds of little things along Dead Man's Trail, and we would run around the tunnels at night, and when we were down there, you know, we would talk about all kinds of things because it was our own private little world, and we talked about how you know, it was just all for oil, and we'd do these protests in town and stuff, and I just decided I didn't want to ride in cars anymore, that it was all about cars, and they were deforesting the planet for cars, and cars were making people fat and lazy, and people were living abnormally long lives without being responsible for themselves or for the environment because cars made it easy. And you know, it was a very radical perspective. I mean, to say the least, it was extremely radical. And so I just decided not to ride in cars anymore. And at first it started out, it was like 2 weeks, and then it turned into 2 months. Like I could only go a little bit, and then I'd be like, oh, my friends are having a party, and I couldn't resist. And then I would like, okay, I'd break it for a night, and then I'd feel kind of bad, and then I'd start it up again. And so I kind of there was a little period of time where I could only do 2 weeks, and then it was only 2 months, and then finally I just started all over and went the 4 years. And
from age 15 to 19.
No, when it was finally 16, that's when I started the 4-year thing. So actually, I didn't really ride in cars for almost 5 years, but I did ride in cars a few different times the first year. And so I decided to take my mountain bike and my bike trailer and leave America. I didn't know anything about immigration. I didn't know anything about anything. I was just this kid, and I just figured I could just ride my bike to Canada, and I had to file for the draft, and so I wasn't excited about that, and so I was like, I'm just going to leave America. I didn't get along with my family, and so I just decided to leave. And then a bunch of my friends who were all going to go on a motorcycle trip, it was the same year that Ike left as well. Ike, he and a bunch of punk kids, they all, we all got out of school, and he went train hopping, and he went to Louisiana. And that's where he learned about Cajun food, and when he came back, he decided to start Ike's Cafe.
Wow,
so
what
it's
a
all
story!
connected. Yeah. And
the hobo.
yeah, we were all just a bunch of hobo gypsy runaway kids, and there was a lot of us living in town in 92, 93, up until about 96, and then pretty much our generation had dispersed and done other things, and then the next wave was kind of a lot younger than us, and their parents weren't so much hippies, and so they were more towny kids who they all kind of were raised with video games and TVs and stuff, and we didn't, you know, most of us didn't have electricity and things growing up, so we didn't have those. We were kind of the last of that generation of back to the lander, of, you know, the first generation of back to lander kids. And so catching back up to my story.
Oh,
so,
you were living in the Dead Man's Trail. Tell me
yeah,
about that dead
was
Chinese
back
man.
Before all this. So, when I ran away from home, I went and I stayed on the trail back behind the Stonehouse, and I just camped in the bushes back there for a whole summer and into the winter until the snow was like falling on my sleeping bag, and then finally a friend came and let me sleep in a little closet bedroom kind of thing that he had. It was really, really small, but it had a bed in it. And then I stayed there and wintered it out, and then in the spring a bunch of us moved into this communal house, and then once we lived in the communal house, then that was when we were walking through the tunnels and all that kind of stuff.
So what's under the tunnels? What did you see? I'm curious.
I mean, they're pretty much just the sewage tunnels of Nevada City, and there's a lot of them, and they go everywhere, and they pop up in various places, like inside Mateo, what's now Mateo's. At the time it was Country Rose, and yeah, they're all over the place, and you can go. There's a bunch of places you can access them. The easiest places are on Washington Street in Nevada City. There's the Washington Street overpass by the post office.
Yes.
There's a house there that used to be the Yellow House, which is where we lived, but now it's a white house. And in the backyard, right on the edge of the freeway on-ramp, there is a manhole, and you can climb into that manhole, and that manhole will take you into the sewer pipe which just goes everywhere. And the easiest way to get there is underneath the Highway 2049 overpass that separates the Stonehouse from main downtown. If you go underneath that overpass, there's a
Green Bridge.
drain. Yeah, it's between the Green Bridge and the other overpass. If you go underneath there, there's a drain, and that's the easiest one to get into because most of the other ones pop up on private property or something.
We have to go sometime.
Yeah, it's good.
The one on the
Stonehouse.
Yeah, the one on the Stonehouse doesn't look like sewage.
No,
it's
no.
Spring water. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
5 different passages.
Oh wow.
And people told me it used to be an opium den.
Right.
And the Chinese were using it to walk to Chinatown because they were not allowed to walk inside.
Wow.
Within the city limits.
Wow.
And the prostitutes and prohibition.
Right.
Bootleggers.
So
it's beautiful.
Just a little bit. Yeah. So that.
Okay. So you move into the yellow house.
So we moved to the yellow house and we went
but
on a
you
bike
still
trip.
have your bike. And you went to Canada.
We didn't make it to Canada. We went to that village instead. And we went. Once we got there, then we decided our whole vision changed. And we realized that we weren't even going to be able to get into Canada because we didn't know anything.
You didn't have passports.
But we didn't have passports. Well, that's when you didn't need passports. You could just go into Canada.
Yes.
But we didn't have anything. So we decided to come home and build a village. So we came home and we built a big cedar bark teepee village. But it was not totally traditional. What we did is we dug holes in the ground and then we peeled fir and cedar poles. And then we put vertical poles up and made retaining walls and stacked the fir and cedar poles along the backside of the dirt, and then made little drainage with gravel and everything. And then we built a cedar bark teepee up on top of the hole so you could stand up in it. And then we made cattail mats and well, actually, we wrapped the cedar poles of the teepee itself with grapevines, and then we made cattail mats, harvesting cattails from local ponds, and placed those on top of the grapevines. And then we would collect a bunch of duff from the forest, like the leaves and the pine needles and everything, and pile that on top of the cattails. And then we would put the cedar bark down with the inside facing out, because the internal cambium layer sheds water really well.
Yes.
Makes like a gutter.
It's like gutter, yes.
So we would stack them all with the inside facing in, the outside facing out. I mean, the inside facing out, excuse me. And then we would go over and cover that again with the bark, with the exterior facing out, just like a tree. So they would just look like these little tree houses, like a pointed cedar teepee. And so we made a whole village of those, and we had a kitchen.
Where was this?
It was up on the ridge. What now is Rowan and Gordon's property.
Oh,
they bought the land after we had moved out a number of years after. At the time, it was owned by this couple called Gordon and Judy. Gordon was for a while as far as I'm aware, he was either the highest or one of the highest grossing real estate agents for Century 21 in the
Gordon
county.
Baker?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We lived on his property, yeah.
Oh my
He wasn't involved then. He was just a humble painter, and they were super new agey, and they were just, they didn't know any of us, and they just moved up here, I think from the Bay Area, and they were into free love and free everything, and they were just,
so
let's
sweet.
just do an experiment with these hippie kids in our backyard.
How many are there? Oh, were there?
There were, it fluctuated between about 7 to 9 of us, but there was only 2 girls, so it was a little tense. So we passed the girls around. Which actually, that's not really true. There was one, Star was the one girl, and she was in a relationship, so we passed the other girl around. And it created a lot of tension, and that's basically ended up being the downfall of our village.
I know there was a woman involved.
Yeah. Well, not enough women involved. There was only one. That was the problem. So when Levin and a few of us came back, when we came back from a bike trip, we decided to teach a lot of the kids that we'd gone to school with, including Star and other of our peers, how to make fire with sticks and how to tan hides and build shelters. And Mariana, who was in here, her boyfriend Patrick, her partner, he was much younger than us, and when he got a couple years older, he was inspired by us when we were in our late teens, and he was probably like 12 or 13 or something.
Wow.
So as he got to be about 15 or 16, then he started making little earth lodges, which is how it ties into the story of when she was in here. And when they got together, he was making a little earth lodge.
Wow.
So
What is the earth lodge? Just built out of dirt?
Well, it's just like the cedar bark teepee, or you know.
That's why you call it.
Yeah.
Wow. What a story.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you change to start riding car?
It has to do with a woman.
I know there's a woman involved again.
Yeah, no, there's a million women involved. So, I got really lonely, and all my friends they all had girlfriends, and they all were drinking beer. They'd all gone back to kind of a young teenage, young 20s lifestyle, and they were drinking beer and going to parties and being raucous and, you know, staying out late and doing all those kinds of things, which I wasn't attracted to, but I was really lonely. And quitting cars was much easier than quitting sex. Quitting sex is the worst. I mean, that's why all these gurus and other people, they end up being just corrupt, because they set standards for themselves that are just unnatural. It's just not. It's totally natural not to ride a car. Not having sex is not natural. I mean, there's probably not much that we do that's more natural than having sex, except for maybe eating and, you know, shitting or something.
Okay, so you get lonely. So
I got really lonely. I got really lonely.
Back to the wagon again.
So I got a girlfriend, and so I started riding my bike a lot, because part of the story I forgot to mention was I'd even quit my bike. I'd stopped riding my bike, and because I didn't want to buy oil to oil my chain, so I was like using little dead animals on the side of the road, and using the fat out of them to oil the chain of my bike. And I just was over the bike, because parts would break and cables would break, and I'd have to go to town, and I just wanted to get more and more native. And so I got a wolf pup, and I trained him when I was 19. I trained him to, as he was little, I trained him to pull little sticks. I made a little harness with him for him, and then as he grew bigger, I finally got like a really big, like a Clydesdale horse harness. And because they have draft horses down at Millhouse.
Yes.
And so I got one of those big horse harnesses, and I made a harness for him with it, and on his body rather than his face, and made him, you know, I made a little travelogue kind of sled, and had a little fire grate on it, and my little earth flag, and eventually I put wheels on it because it just kept wearing the sticks down. But and he would carry all my stuff, and I had all these little camps all over the place with just like I'd just duck out of the, you know, off the roads or off the trails, wherever, and I just have this little tiny clearing that I would make with a little stone circle and my little fire pit, and I would just show up there, and I'd have my little fire grate on my dog sled, and I'd just roll out my bedroll, and my wolf, his name was Talanqua. We lived like that for a couple years, and finally I ended up getting lonely, though, so back to the girl. And I met this really, really wonderful girl. Her name was Krista. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman, and we met in a sweat lodge during my rites of passage. My father and a few other uncle types of the community put on for me. And
what age?
I was
21?
No, I was 19, almost 20, and I was really reluctant to do rites of passage. I didn't want to do it at all, and they tried to do it when I was 13, and I said no. And they tried to do it when I was 15, and they forced me, and I finally quit. And then they did it again when I was 19 and 20. And
why? You just don't like ceremony?
I don't like ceremonies at all, and I don't like authority, and I don't like, I've always found that my own intuition is my best guidance, and unless I really have respect for some aspect of somebody's character, I just always, you know, kind of feel in my heart that it's better to be my own guide. And so, right or wrong, that's what I've done. And for the most part, and when I haven't, it has turned out in a lot of cases to work against me. So over and over, the voice of intuition does seem to be justified. Anyways, regardless of all that, Krista and I got together, and I started riding my bike again, and I chased her all around the county because she had a little car and a little yellow Volkswagen Bug, and I would chase her on my mountain bike and try to keep up, and you know, just try to keep up a lifestyle, following her around and going to visit her where she lived way out on Ubet Road, and I lived up on the ridge, so I'd ride my bike out there all the time. And
2 hours.
Yeah, and it was tiring. And so finally I was just like, you know what, I'm all alone, I'm never going to have anything. I can't find a woman who wants to live this life. And I thought that I was really publicizing myself pretty big, and it seemed like if you're a big flower, some bee's going to notice, or a butterfly, but none did. Or they noticed, but they weren't, what the nectar I had wasn't what I wanted, yeah. They might have liked me, but they didn't want to, live in a hut with a wolf as a pillow, so, which is understandable. So anyways, I decided to ride in cars, and I used to do a lot of ceremonies, and I used to do a lot of praying. I was an atheist as a kid, and then I saw that people had a lot of magic, and so I experimented, and I was open to it. And well, I was open to an extent. My intuition told me that job was a figment of people's imagination. A lot of organized religion was, but the idea of spirit and essence and energy and setting intentions and making those intentions happen, as kind of like you reverberate the cells through the air, as you just cast out waves. I could see that really easily. Of course, I was taking a lot of psychedelics at the time, so that's a major influence, to say the least. But after a period of time, I stopped doing all of those drugs, and I stopped doing all those things, and I returned back to my original nature, and I had eyes wide open to the beauty of the forest and all these other things around me that those drugs gave to me, but I was no longer dependent on them in order to see the things that were there right in front of my face the whole time that as a child I was kind of unaware of. And because they open up your receptors to things that are around you that you're not necessarily paying attention to, and make life more vivid in a lot of ways. And so then we got together, and I made a little ceremony, and I prayed for the right thing to do, and I, for whatever that's worth, I made a little coal with my sticks. I made a little fire with my sticks and smudged myself in the car, and did all that kind of stuff. I was really into that kind of stuff at the time. And then I got in the car, and I went down, and I saw the Highway 49 bridge for the first time, because it had been there for 3 years. It was built a year into my car fast, and so I'd never seen the 49 bridge. And
I thought you bike over it.
I would ride Purdon or Edwards.
Oh,
so I never actually saw it. And then, but I just felt like a hypocrite, because the food that I would get from the market, or from Mountain People's Warehouse, I'd do bulk food orders, whatever, it would all come on the trucks. And even though I felt like I was doing my part as much as I possibly could, I was getting really self-righteous. And the dangerous part of living with your integrity is that there's a very fine line of being good and clear-hearted and feeling, I don't want to use the word righteous in the same sense, but feel like you are living your path and true to your nature, and being self-righteous about it. It's a very fine line, and I don't know if anybody, or it's even really humanly possible, to sustainably not cross that line when you live so close to your dreams and your intentions. So I became very self-righteous, and I chased away a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that loved me and were supportive of me, and so I set myself up for an immense humility, and so I did. I completely went from being this kind of righteous kid who hadn't ridden in cars and everybody loved, and to all of a sudden being this broke bum, hippie kid walking down the road who was hitchhiking and had a dog that needed a ride in the back of their car. And it changed the whole thing, and it made me realize, to some very limited degree, in a whole new era and a whole new body with fragmented roots and fragmented culture, kind of the experience of Ishi, where you go from living a lifestyle that's very close to nature, and then all of a sudden you are basically a museum ornament, and you are dressed in a suit and you cut off your hair and you go live in society, but you're at the bottom of the barrel in society because you have no education, you have no anything. So I learned these lessons, and I continue to learn them because I don't have that kind of education, because I chose that lifestyle.
Would you like to go eat? Shall we go take a break and come
Sure.
back later?
Sure.
Get some food? Thank you. That's